Hey everybody, it's Eric with Motion Guidance. Thanks for joining me again today on this live stream. Today's topic is going to be vestibular applications, and this is a really big one. We see so much posting on our social media sites, at Motion Guidance for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, of people using the visual feedback integrated daily in their vestibular applications in their clinics. So this is going to be a great topic for people to get some introduction, maybe for some people, into how to use visual feedback for some of your screening tools and some of your treatment tools for vestibular rehabilitation. For other people, it's going to be maybe refreshing how they're doing it and how they might be able to do some of these things a little more proficiently. And then for others, it's just going to be creating ideas. And that's really what adding visual feedback in for motion guidance is about. So creating ideas of how to integrate forms of visual feedback for learning and for performance in your clinic, and utilizing motion guidance to be able to do that. So getting out your clinician kits, using different belts and mounts, and your rechargeable green lasers that are customized by us, to be able to get these into your clinics. Remember, the true value of adding visual feedback is you're combining the kinesthetic, the visual auditory feedback that people are traditionally getting in their clinics, and giving people the other option of getting visual feedback on how they're doing, and letting them investigate that, as well as giving clinicians more information. So when we talk about vestibular rehab, there's a pretty big umbrella that we have to go through for talking about that. We have to talk about concussion. We have to talk about general balance disorders. Some of those actually might be more vestibular based. Some might be more orthopedic based. We have true movement disorders. We have things like Parkinsonianisms, dystonias, different types of tremor. So you have some resting types of tremor, like a rider's tremor. You might have an orthostatic tremor that are uncontrollable, and those would fall into that umbrella of the things that we want to do for basal ganglia disorders. You might have dizziness underneath vestibular therapy, and there's of course different types of dizziness, whether that's driven by cervical oriented dizziness or origin dizziness, whether that's BPPV, or different types of oculomotor dizziness things from different centers of the brain. And those all can typically be treated with visual feedback with motion guidance. Now, BPPV, you're not going to use the visual feedback for actually treating that condition, but there may be other systems that have been affected by having the rotatory nystagmus effect, and so we can treat those secondary effects with motion guidance. So other things can be CVA or stroke, other forms of decompensation that happen with different impairments or traumas throughout a lifetime, whether they're chronic or acute. And then of course, traumatic brain injury can be included in that as well. And so we're gonna touch on a lot of these topics today. And some of these topics will include ocular motor. I know we've done a little bit of that before, as well as joint position sense air testing on a live stream and going over how to do that, but we'll touch on it again for some people who weren't able to make that live stream. Cerebellar based exercises, we'll talk about differences on midline cerebellar versus peripheral cerebellar exercise based things, which would be more complex movement patterns. We'll touch on some cognitive overlays that people can have, as well as some ambulation and walking applications. That'll be good. We'll start with some basics there and then progress into things that you can even do with athletics. And then we'll talk about some soft service training, of course. We'll just be adding a different environment to getting people some balance challenges, and then how we can focus on peripheral vision and dorsal stream type of vision versus ventral stream type of vision, and why they're important to interchange the both of those together to determine what's in our environment and how we react to our environment. All right, so let me go ahead and close my windows here, and so I can share my screen. And we'll go ahead and share this guy. I'll get this out of the way, so should be sharing now. All right. So let's start with some ocular motor things. So this is a series of videos. I'll spread these out just a little bit on my desktop here, so we'll be able to get to all of them. I'll bring them to the front. But these are in my particular clinic. These were taken with permission, but I had a woman coming in. She had an insidious onset of waking up one day with some dizziness. She's still going through some testing. They've cleared out any CVA kind of condition. We're getting some further testing on some Meniere's and vestibular cochlear nerve involvement for her, but we wanted to take a look at some baseline measures with her in the clinic. And so we were looking at some ocular motor reflexes, going through saccades, going through general smooth pursuits, going through VOR. And I wanted to show the series of testing and treatment during her VOR, since this is going to be involved in dizziness. Now, she had such a significant attack that it impaired her activities of daily living and her quality of life. She's now on a walker for fear of falling. She can go short distances, but she always feels like she's off with those. She does have some fixation issues on testing. And so we got her in front of the target here. I standardize everything in my facility at 5 feet because that joins with the joint position sense air testing that I do using the motion guidance system with the maze flag that comes in the clinician kit. But this was her initial assessment. So let me magnify this and we'll see how she was doing. So the key points here is that if you look toward the top of the flag, you'll see the laser up here. She's going to be looking at the center target, and I'm going to have her go back and forth, moving her head while fixating gaze on the center target. And the laser will be a representation of her movement. Okay, so we're going to look for a few different things here. We'll watch the video, then we'll talk about it. So let's see this just kind of roll out. And so just the general cue is shaking her head no back and forth. And again, a normal test would be about 1 hertz back and forth. And we can just video and watch what happens with the laser. Okay. And so again, she's not looking at that top red target. She's looking at the center red target. But I want the laser to give me a representation of what's going on, but I don't want it to be distracting for her. So I'm not putting the laser in the middle of the line of the target. I'm putting the laser above so that she can't see it as well, maybe a little bit out of her peripheral vision. But let's break down what's going on here. So as she does this, you'll notice there's a dominance of left dominant laser movement, suggesting that she has good function of the left-sided system. And when she goes to the right, she starts to shorten that up. So typically this crease in the flag here is where she ends up. And oftentimes the laser goes all the way off the flag to the left. So she's left side dominant, and she also has titubation. So she can't control this smoothly going back and forth. So as we watch this laser move again, so she tries to go back and forth equally. She goes off the flag to the left, more dominant to the left. Can't go to the right as well. She's all over the flag, up and down. Okay, it's bouncing around. And these are things that oftentimes just with the naked eye, you have a hard time looking at and distinguishing in the clinic, right? Unless you have a video representation of what's going on the head. So let's watch that one more time so everybody can see that, okay? And so if this is my initial assessment, I'm going to say, well, we got definitely some issues there that I want to try to have her focus on. No pun intended. So I'm going to have her try to understand, after showing her the video, that she really likes to be to the left and use that right dominant eye. She doesn't like to go to the right and use the left eye for her VOR. So we're going to try to correct that with some of these assessment and training tools. So if we move on to the next video, we're going to change this. So on this video, I turn the flag over because I want her to have a smoother line of what she's trying to move back and forth with. I'm going to have her look at one of these center orange dots. And I move the laser down to this line so she can see it a little bit more in her peripheral vision, but I don't want it to be completely distracting again. Okay, that much visual input can sometimes discourage good movement and be frustrating. So she's looking at this orange dot, but the laser is going to be moving up here, and let's see what happens over this video. So she's going to have the laser up. There we go, but she's looking down, and now the goal is just to get smooth movement of the laser, equidistance between the two orange targets. All right. And so you can see how she really wants to now go to the right with her dominance, but that affected her coming back to the left, and that made her a little dizzy. Okay, so let's watch that again. They're only about 20 seconds long. All right, so she's going to get the laser up at the red target, but she's looking at one of the orange targets. And just see if you can move that laser back and forth, what you think is equidistance while looking at an orange target there. And you can see how she just has difficulty doing that. It's not smooth side to side, and that continues to make her dizzy. If we move on to the next video, okay, through our progression, so I'm giving her chances in between these efforts to let her symptoms calm back down. So if she gets dizzy, we're going to wait until they go away. Okay, if they go away in less than 3 minutes, we're going to continue on with some training. Hers resolve fairly quickly. And you can see how she's getting smoother motion. Okay, let's watch that again. And more equal motion side to side. So she's less titubations, starting to get a nice smoother head motion here, side to side. Sometimes she overcorrects, but she's still learning. And all this is practice and feedback, understanding what what her dysfunction was. Now, this is going to be important, especially when you're transitioning people to home care for in between visits for the VOR. Are they just continuing to do the same faulty pattern, the hypotonic pattern that they had in the clinic, or are they starting to make corrections and understand that they have to make adjustments at home in order to have a normal VOR? Okay, remember, if the VOR is going to be stimulating to their symptoms, you can let that calm down, but that's not going to be a negative thing. Okay, that's going to help them resolve this condition by getting them stimulated, as long as we don't overstimulate them. Okay, that could definitely patient dependent. So let's give one more attempt with her. Hey, go ahead and keep your eyes on those orange guys, and let's really make sure you're getting full motion side to side as you're going through. Okay, and then the increases here would just be for hertz, what her tick-tock motion back and forth, what the speed would be there. And so she's definitely slowed down, but she's understanding where her parameters are for having normal responses to her VOR. Okay, and this is still very difficult for her on day one, but she's getting some good understanding. So those can help for people who are trying to understand what their VOR should look like, as well as how it should feel. And go with those ocular and motor things. So another common thing that we can do with head control with those same patients is go with motor control patterns. So we just get the laser on their head. Now, for motor control activity at the neck, let me mute that. This is part of our Vimeo series on YouTube that we have, and just accuracy with going down into different hemispheres on the flag, tracing, and this would be a time zero type of viewing, and just understanding where our control happens. Can you go on the inside part of the flag? Can you go on the outside part of the flag? Working on precision and even time. So these are things that you could time for a patient, how long it takes them to get around the flag, how many times they go outside of the line dramatically, maybe how many times they stall. And also what area of the flag that happens. If it constantly happens above or below the line, that might suggest some parietal versus temporal issues, and what quadrant to what side could suggest some things there. Okay, these types of flags can also be used for things like saccades. So hey, hold the laser in the middle and then look to different targets on these flags. So look to the left center target, the right center target, go in a diagonal, or go up and down. Okay, and you can even do some of your assessment here, which I often do, especially if I'm noticing some small irregularities. I want to know if they're getting a motor cheat with their their saccade side to side. So if, in this particular still photo, if we were to look to the right side of the flag here with my eyes and the laser moved over every time, then I'm actually getting head movement for my saccades as a substitution pattern. We want to get rid of that. We want to have that laser stay nice and stable and have their eyes move between the targets, horizontal, vertical, and then off axis. All right. Let's see here. Why don't we go on to some target finding, since it's a very similar thing. So we could take these activities and we could do some overlay on cognitive function. And so we can, if the patient has the motion guidance system on and they're centered up on the target, okay, beauty of the ball and socket joint right there. You don't have to move the cradle around. You can just move the laser around and then have them move with control through, into different areas of the numbered target here based on what you call out. And of course you can do some simple math drills with this, okay? Or give 3 and say, go give 3 numbers, go 2, 9, 6, go to the second number, and they have to go to the 9. So breaking down some cognitive overlays there for function and problem solving, and trying to get away from some initiation there can be beneficial. You can also do some peripheral vision training on recognition of different colors. Those could be for go, no-go responses, and see what the responses are there. Some more frontal lobe type of integrations there. All right. All right. So let's let me stop screen sharing for a second and go back. All right. Do we have any questions so far before we kind of move on to some of the other items here? Looks like nothing's in the chat. All right. So let's go back to screen sharing. All right. Okay. So let me get rid of these guys. And let's move on to some more trunk related things. So you could see here putting the motion guidance around the waist, maybe including some single leg balance for different types of vestibular training, having people understand how their pelvis stays level. If the pelvis has a Trendelenburg type of pattern, they might drop that laser. I moved into a tandem stance or maybe even a Romberg stance there, and have them start moving the laser around. I'll just speed this up a little bit. With motion across that hip and maybe motion through the pelvis, okay, get them to higher level, be able to move their pelvis as they're in an unstable point of support or reduced narrowed support. Can they figure out strategies how to move like we are there in different planes, and just moving with control? So giving them some motivation and some visual feedback about what they're trying to achieve there can be very beneficial for the right patient, especially for people who have initiation movement dysfunction with that basal ganglia, on getting them to move. So giving them cues on how to move and control their pelvis and see if they can break through some freezing can be wonderful, looking at that in real time. Here's some quadruped types of activities. So this would be more that midline cerebellar activity. If we look at this particular thing, just with a bird dog, getting a person centered up over a target, and then having them perform either motion from this position or do your typical bird dog, and they'll get immediate feedback on how they're moving, whether they can keep that laser stationary or whether you want to encourage that laser to move. Okay? All of those would be included based on your assessment from the patient, what you think they need. And of course, this has a ton of orthopedic overlay as well. This is a super common exercise for shoulder dysfunctions, for trunk dysfunctions, for concussion things, putting people in a positional challenge for regulatory systems by being horizontal instead of being vertical. You can train those people here, maybe even a POTS-related disorder or something like that. Okay, so you can see her going through your typical bird dog, and she's trying to keep the laser nice and stationary. As a clinician, you can determine what adds value there, or you can start moving off the target and see if they can control it similarly side versus side, or whether you feel like they might have a dysfunction there. So if they're having too much trouble with the bullseye type of pattern, you can always flip the drop target that comes with the clinician kit over, and you can have them moving around with that. All right. This would just provide more focus on narrowing up their movement. And what I'm showing is the bullseye there. So that would definitely be, like I said, there's a lot of overlay there that could be considered a midline cerebellar activity. You can even have this with a line here on the ground, and they're crawling along, trying to see if they can keep their vestibular system working while they're not moving too far off the line. That can be a fun game also for pediatric patients, and getting them to be motivated to move and follow the laser, per se. All right. What else we got here? So previously we've talked about joint position sense air testing. Here's another video on that. So let me get rid of the auditory here. So remember, you want your patient to be looking directly at the target, and then you adjust the laser. That's the big portion. If we've standardized the distance and the target onto our maze flag that comes with the clinician kit. And remember the standardizations here. So having them not move their trunk, you could also put a laser on the trunk. Trevelyan has done a research article published on that. But we want them to do 3 practice trials with their eyes open, and then they do a minimum of 6 practice trials with their eyes closed. If 3 out of the 6 of those are outside the light blue field on our target, like you see here with this gentleman, then they're going to have a positive response for joint position sense air at the head neck. If they have 4 trials that it's inside the standard deviation, you can see how he's way off, then you might as well stop testing. If you have 3 trials that are outside the standard deviation, you might as well stop testing there also. Both of those would either be negative or positive for a joint position sense error. Okay. So just a quick review on that, because we've done another live stream. I encourage you to go watch that whole video if you're not familiar with the full testing there. But let's get on to some more dynamic types of testing and treatment applications. Something like this with single leg stance. You'll notice down here at the bottom, and he has the laser on his head, and he's doing some motor control things in a single leg stance. So increasing his balance response while he's going through motor control actions at his head neck region, right? And he's doing an infinity pattern, top right to bottom left, and then he can also switch. He's doing the outer blue. Okay. He's also turning his body 45 degrees, which is what he's pointing out there. Again, let me get rid of this this audio here. And he can also do the smaller patterns if he feels so inclined to get those in. And so as he starts turning to the left, he definitely has an increased difficulty dropping his head down into that lower quadrant on the left. You can see that. And so that's a good representation of how quadranted motions can be more difficult. So that puts him in a little bit of right rotation there, by the way, because his body's off 45 degrees to the left. So that makes it difficult for some people, and that can be where they need to go through training. If you see top left to bottom right, as he's doing here, less of a problem in that lower quadrant, for sure, on the right side versus the left side. What about some things that might be included with dual tasking? Oh, no, here's complex movement patterns first, sorry. And so if we get into single leg stance, this is the same patient, we can get the laser out into the periphery with a straight arm, and that's going to be more complex movement patterns or arcing patterns from the cerebellum. So he can work on small motor patterns there on one side, and then he has to dual task once those are good. So he has to give a little bit of a catch or a throw and catch on the left side there as he's moving through complex movement patterns on the right side. So really testing dual tasking in different forms of vestibular rehab here, where one side is doing some cerebellar priming, the other side is doing dual tasking, different areas of the brain, and then you also have it in single leg stance, reducing the base of support. If we take that same patient and let's see here, we can progress on to walking skills. So let's make sure this is the right one. I think it is. So this is an infinity walk or a butterfly walk. So he's got the laser at a target that's on the wall. I just used one of the motion guidance contact pads and stuck that onto a clock that we have in the clinic. And I have 2 foam rollers. So there's several things that are breaking down here. So we have the person doing the infinity walk, which means his head neck is moving, but his visual gaze is fixated on a single target. Okay. The laser helps us understand if he is maintaining there. You can see right there, he had to look down at the ground to see where he was going to walk, and the laser automatically follows right there. So going behind that right-sided target really is tough for this particular individual. He wants to look down. You can see that again. He just doesn't feel comfortable over there. So versus just doing a particular activity and doing a very particular activity specifically, okay, and looking at where their deficits are can really be enhanced with the visual feedback from the motion guidance device. So if we look at that again, kind of midway through, he can go around this side. He does pretty well there going through. When he's going around in front and just backing up, he does pretty well. But as soon as we make him reverse, you can see where the deficit kind of pops in of what he doesn't like to do. So I think he has, yep, he's going to stop right there and kind of reverse it. And he has to back up this time. He wants to look now. And if he has to back up here, that laser's really going to drop down. You see how far that went down? And he even lost his balance a little bit there as he's going around. So now we have a better indication of what we need to work on. So is he getting a peripheral vision issue over on the right side? Is that a thalamus problem that we might have to re-educate for blind spot over on that side? There's a lot of things to consider with that information, but it's definitely different going toward this right target to the left. I also chose white versus blue foam rollers for him. And foam rollers versus targets on the ground, because he has to consider getting around a larger target without having to look down. If you're just going to step on a target on the ground, that might not have as much of a consequence versus knocking over a foam roller. So it really encourages and motivates the patient to get around that area, and you can look at their pattern versus just stepping on targets on the ground or around targets on the ground might not give you as much information about where their deficits are. If we look at another example with this particular patient, now he has to actually leave the field of view and come back and find it. So his head has to do a full turn. This is going to be pretty tough from a vestibular standpoint. Okay, so he has to turn all the way around that target. So he follows with fixation, he loses it, and he has to come back. Okay, you'll start noticing some differences when he has to turn to the left. He finds that target fairly quickly. When he has to come back around and go to the right, he really lags behind. He's almost back to the foam roller as the target by the time he gets back to with the laser to the target there. So you can see how delayed that is when he has to turn toward his right versus turning toward his left. So again, he has some changes on that right side when he's working through dynamic system balance and vestibular activities. So that's what we end up working on. That was much better that time, giving us some feedback. I need you to get that laser on the target much sooner as you turn around. And if that makes him dizzy, there we go. Okay. Then we do that until his tolerance is low, let him recover, and then try that again. All right. So one more topic for today. Let's look at some activities. This was posted recently on our social media pages, and again, this is a Parkinsonian clinic. that is working on these types of things, and they're finding that improvements in the bradykinetic or the freezing postures for their patients that are using the motion guidance device. And so this was posted recently. So this gentleman has Parkinson's. This was reposted and allowed me to use this with permission. He's trying to do a couple things here. He's working on recognition. He's working on body awareness. And he's also working on this freezing posture. So this is some cognitive overlay that he's doing, going back and forth with the laser. This is a different balance drill. But as he starts to make his way through the maze here, the report from the clinician taking the video was that the patient was able to improve their upright posture as soon as they turned the laser on. Their freezing became less, so he's working on jumping drills and movement here, putting the laser where he wants to go as a motivational tool, so an external focus of attention rather than an internal focus. Hey, don't just move your feet, but go step on the laser, right? Get over there and use that external focus of attention. And they're seeing some nice things out of this clinic. And of course, they do a variety of different drills here, including using motion guidance with the laser, and just trying to keep that upright posture here as he's walking instead of constantly looking down toward the ground. So we're going to see the tremor. That doesn't bother us because of the known condition, right? But if he can start working on upright posture and moving around, using some gaze fixation, it's going to help with other motor control activities like you're seeing here. Definitely wouldn't want to be the person doing the video capture there in front of that guy. Okay, and does that translate over? Can he predict better? Can he then move better? Okay, get out of his freezing postures better. So let me get out of this. We'll get back into the stop screen sharing mode. All right. And so if we kind of do a summary today on different aspects of what we've been trying to work on with some education for vestibular applications. We've talked about walking. We've talked about complex movement patterns with the cerebellar system. We've talked about midline cerebellar activity. We've talked about oculomotor things. We've talked about balance and trunk control. We've talked about movement disorders and basal ganglia type dysfunction. And all those things will fall under vestibular, but the wide variety or range of activities that people can use with the motion guidance device can make this interesting, can make it motivating, can use as diagnostics, can use as an assessment tool for how people are progressing, and just the applications are going to be never ending. So let me go into the chat and see if anybody has any questions. Yeah, this is going to be a repeat. We are going to do this again at 10 o'clock for the person that asked that. So we had 2 times out today based on a request. So this will be repeated coming up. So you'll see this information again. All right. All right. All right, guys. So that takes us through that first run today. So the code for getting on the call today is going to be Black Friday 30. And that, if you put that in during checkout at motionguidance.com, that gets you 30% off all of our products. And that's the early code. So you don't have to wait till Black Friday to get that done. For this live stream, once again, that doesn't include the bundled distributor packs, but it includes everything else. If you weren't able to catch the first run today, we'll be doing this again in about 30 minutes at 10 Mountain Standard. And so I'll see everybody back then. All right. Let's see.
groups is doing eye head following exercises with something like motion guidance, or even just using your head and following your thumb while moving your head might actually be more beneficial to stimulate visual feedback. But what I found to be most therapeutic for these muscle groups is doing eye head following exercises with something like motion guidance, or even just using your head and following your thumb while moving your head might actually be more beneficial to stimulate visual feedback.
All right, everybody, let's get going. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Eric with Motion Guidance, and today's topic is going to be vestibular rehabilitation, and this is a huge topic. We see so many posts on our social media pages at Motion Guidance for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. A lot of sharing of vestibular applications all across the world. People understanding the value of adding visual feedback to their vestibular rehabilitation. And we see a lot of crossing over of visual feedback with vestibular applications and orthopedic applications, pediatric applications, all over the place. So this is a really hot topic of how to integrate this tech into what you're doing with your clinic, using it for assessment as well as treatment. And so we're going to go over a lot of different applications here, and it'll take us a while. I have a lot of videos showing applications that are drawn from my personal clinic as well as other things that have happened and we've done for some of our education series. So when we talk about vestibular under that umbrella, we're talking about things like traumatic brain injury. We're talking about concussion. We're talking about balance activities, gait and ambulation activities. We're talking about movement disorders. And we're going to touch on all those types of things in the next half hour to 40 minutes, getting people up to speed about stimulating the thought process of things that they can do for different applications like oculomotor, balance type of activities, even some cognitive overlay activities, working with Parkinsonianisms, and how we can possibly utilize visual feedback and different forms of external focus of attention to help get through bradykinetic or freezing episodes. Just going to be all over the place. And so it should be a great live stream. We'll take a few extra seconds in between some videos to see if there's anything in the chat. So don't forget to include your questions into the chat forum there, and we'll get to those as we can. And so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to screen share, and the first thing we're going to do is look at some applications for a patient that came into my office, and she has been diagnosed with non-BPP dizziness, and there were some questions whether there was some central origin for that, and she's still getting some workup, but they wanted me to go through an evaluation with her, and I'm going to share part of that evaluation with her. We're considering Meniere's disease with her, some vestibulocochlear nerve things that could be going on, but she had regressed all the way to requiring a front-wheeled walker for her to ambulate. So she felt so dizzy and off with the world that she felt like she was going to fall quite a bit. So started with a general visual exam, so just regular smooth pursuits, active motion types of things. Those were all fine. No nystagmus with fixation during testing. And when she was doing general saccades, she had more trouble with vertical saccades than horizontal saccades. VOR just didn't look right as she was doing it. She got immediately dizzy. The pattern wasn't clean. So I decided to get her on the motion guidance system to see a clearer picture of what was going on. And this is where people who are using this technology in clinic are really going to have an additive of technology they can video with their phone or another device without having to get very expensive equipment to do this. So let me share my screen. Let's go through the series of videos of what she looked like on day one, going through her VOR and how this can change how you see patients during your ocular motor screening. All right, so let me share my screen here, and we'll go through the entire screen here so you can see everything. So let me get rid of this. Okay, so let's take a look at this first video here with her. And this is shared with permission, of course. So the setup here, let's go over this first. So she's 5 feet away from the target. That's how I standardize everything in clinic now, because our maze motion guidance flag is set up for joint position sense air testing at 5 feet. That was a previous live stream that we talked about that information can be found in our YouTube videos, Vimeo page, things like that. So she's 5 feet away. She has the middle to large size band on her head, and she has the perpendicular mount with the green laser on. Now, for initial testing, I have them look at the center target here. So that's where their fixation is going to be for the VOR. I have the laser up here. You can kind of see a little red, the green dot up here. And that's going to give me a representation going back and forth of what her VOR quality is, the distance side to side, and if there's anything else I need to kind of check out there. Now, the same with all of our testing. As we go through this, if it makes her dizzy, I want to know that. We're going to do a general test for approximately 10 seconds. But remember, treatment can be up to 1 minute several times, with the idea of stimulating them mildly. And if they do get stimulated, you might have to have them rest for a while to recover, and then try that again, depending on what their symptom presentation is. But let's just roll this video and see what we see together. Let me get rid of the audio here. So she's looking at the center red target and then just moving back and forth. So let's just watch this one time through. All right, so let's play that again and let's break this down a little bit. So a couple things that you might have noticed when we're doing this, distance measurements. So I actually haven't ironed out the folds in my flags. I've noticed that it actually gives me another distance measurement that I can see very easily, although these iron out pretty quickly on low heat, if you're have that personality type, I guess. I do have the laser so far up that she can't really see it. It's not under her field of vision as she's going back and forth. You'll notice titubations. So you'll notice an irregularity of smoothness of the excursion of the laser side to side. We need to figure out why that is. We also are going to notice a tendency to have increased left laser excursion here. So her right eye tends to be dominated forward when she's in that position. Versus toward the right, which would be left eye dominated in that position. So nose to the right is much less excursion than to the left. So let's take a look at those two things again as we roll this through. So you'll see her start slowly, and as she tries to increase, she's off the flag oftentimes to the left and only to the right crease there on the flag. And she's up and down. She's just all over the place, but she has that tendency to be toward that left side. And that reduces her dizziness when we ask her on report. So is that making you dizzy? Just mildly. So that gives us a baseline that we can share with her and say, hey, we're seeing these things. Let's not worry about the bouncing for right now, but let's see if we can do some things to train you to have more of a center equal excursion during your VOR. So if I get out of this video and I go on to the next one, so I've flipped the flag around to the other side. And this allows me to have more of an even excursion line on this side for her. And we could have initiated the testing on this side, but the butterfly pattern was already up on my wall, so we just did it there. I still have the laser above her on this red circle here, but she's going to be looking at this orange target. So she's going to definitely be able to see a little bit of that in the visual field. And that's going to give her some representation of the quality and the distance of her movement. And let's see how she does with this one. So let me just isolate this one a little bit, get rid of the audio again. And so she starts to go back and forth with this one. She's looking at the orange target, and this is just a practice run of her understanding how far she needs to go to the right to have equal motion. And she just doesn't like to do it. So you'll see her pause a little bit and say, hey, I got to really get over there. It's really easy to go to the left side. It's much harder to go to the right side. But it gives her a quantification of how far she needs to go in order to have equal motion of her VOR right versus left while still having a center gaze. And once again, her center gaze is down and through this area of the second orange target. All right. And these are practice runs. On a scale of 0 to 10, if we want to take like a VOMS type of score, she reports she feels a 7 out of dizziness. on that particular scale during that. And as we keep going through practice runs, let me get this bigger. Sorry, there we go. I need to remind her, hey, don't look directly at the laser. You're going to be looking at a bottom line, but let's try to go back and forth at a faster cadence now and see if we can get closer to 1 hertz, which is our standardization for doing the VOR, going side to side. And now she's really trying to, if we watch this again, she's really trying to increase her speed and keep equidistance, and she just does not like it, but she's definitely learning that she has to go to that right side. She just can't go to the left side with the laser. She has to go back and forth. And so this is a form of improvement for us just by recognition that she has to go to that right side when she's doing her VOR. Okay, she just can't dominate to the left side turn. And so as we keep going here with this practice with her, you'll definitely see an increased uniformity in her excursion side to side. It's not perfect, but this is all inside one training session, just different repetitions with it. Less titubation going up and down. She's getting a better understanding of what level on the horizon is with her VOR, and she's showing dramatic improvement by allowing herself to get better understanding with visual representation of this. And then, of course, we review the videos afterwards. On this particular scale, she got down to a 3 out of 10 on dizziness, as she reported, compared to the first one, which was a 7 out of 10. So we cut that in half on her dizziness scale over 10 seconds in doing that. So if we go back to the first video, just as a quick comparison to that one. Okay, so she's really irregular in her cadence, definitely irregular in her distance excursion from side to side. And she's got a lot of changes in the horizontal plane going up and down. So she's getting vertical at times, especially going toward the right. And she's just kind of all over the place. So if you can imagine in small movements of just walking around and having her look back and forth, a VOR representation of her fixation there and what her head can do, we start to get a better picture of why she might be feeling dizzy just walking around. All right. So that's one example there. Let's go through a few more of the head neck while we're here, and then we're taking some chat questions. So here's one of our home exercise program videos. Another option with vestibular rehab is just doing time-0 viewing, or more kind of a motor control type of exercise at the head neck. And so you'll see me here doing these and just going around the different butterfly patterns here and following this. So this is more cerebellar in nature versus ocular motor reflex, because the eyes and the head are following through the same plane. If this was very dysfunctional, there's different things that we can look at here. So you can look at precision, and not only precision on the line, but precision in hemispheres. So above the line or below the line might tell you more temporal versus parietal involvement. Right versus left side, so a cerebellar being an ipsilateral decompensation might tell you if there's a right versus a left side issue working around this type of target. This can also be used for targeting and motivation, so moving in through these different outside targets with your head and getting off-axis things. This can also be used for saccades. So if I'm centering up the target here for my saccades, I can have a person look between the two targets in the horizontal plane, back and forth. I can have them look up and down. I can cue them when to look, so I can see what their eye fixation is. So I can be over here, recording this from the back, looking at their eyes, and then of course going to different corners off axis can give you information about how smooth their saccade is. So what would that look like? If it was dysfunctional, and typically we see the single side dysfunction or a hypotonic side, that if I have them look toward the right target, the laser would follow that target. So that would move over toward the 3 as they moved here. As they moved to the left, it probably wouldn't move at all, or vice versa. If they had a dysfunction moving down to the right, they'd move their eyes down here and the laser would follow their eyes. And so the laser allows us to learn where their pattern is not pure, and therefore they can get feedback on how they're doing without having to use an expensive software or something like that. We can also overlay this with some cognitive activities, and they can move the laser with control and possibly with speed into a certain area based on maybe some math skills or a sequence of numbers. So if I say what's 2 plus 2, they'd have to move to the 4. What's 9 minus 6, they'd have to move to the 3. If I say 3, 8, 7, move to the second number that I mentioned. So there's some short-term memory recall. They'd have to move to the 8, and they just have to compute these things. So with depending on the effect of CVA or some stroke or traumatic brain injury, that might be effective. You can also work on some peripheral vision items here. So some dorsal stream actions where you have the person bring up a card, or you can bring up a card. They have to label the card. And then after they do the correct color, they have to go to a certain number. If they notice just the cognitive input of either avoiding a go, no-go response by having them move too early. I'm moving on to other things here in the video. Those could also be implemented there as well. So let's go back, see if there's any questions in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. This will pop back on me. And I'll give 30 seconds or so to see if anybody has any questions about that in the chat, or otherwise we'll move on to the next area. We'll do more dynamic vestibular applications and some trunk things as well. And then we're finally going to finish up with some Parkinsonian type applications for vestibular today. All right, guys, looks like everybody's just following along, getting some ideas, which is great. So let's jump back over to videos. And let me screen share again, and we'll get the entire screen. I don't care if you see my background on this. And so let's not do that one. Let's do this one. All right. So another video that's on our home exercise program Vimeo page and YouTube page is going to be trunk action. So in this case, we can do some narrow basis support or some single limb support. So I'm going to be in single leg stance or in like a Romberg or a tandem type of stance, and we can work on control of the pelvis. So not just trying to hold the body stable. That's going to be a common one with the visual feedback with the laser. Hey, just keep the laser inside of a certain target. So it could be this middle circle here, or it could be in a hemisphere or a quadrant on the flag, but actually starting to create some movement through that. So can we develop people's balance reaction mechanisms to also include the willingness to be able to move inside of those to control? So not just trying to hold things stable, but gaining control through movement. Anybody who's ever been on a paddleboard or a surfboard in the ocean, if you are trying to just stay super stable, that can be very tough. If you're actually trying to do a fluid movement, a small movement through the ankles and through the pelvis and through the knees, that can help you gain stability on that board. And that's what we're talking about with these same type of activities. So making the balance more engaging for your patient can yield improved results for them. So going through a pelvic tilt, going through hip range of motion there, and then combining those types of things, right? So getting more dynamic with your balance applications. Can you even force them to really go through large excursion movements like you saw there? And of course, you could do some cognitive overlay with these things as well. This can definitely promote some more advanced applications orthopedically, as well as you have a person who maybe has an ankle sprain and they're recovering. That could be a fun one to go through as well. And then, so bird dogs are something very common in back applications for exercise, in shoulder applications for exercise. But this is a midline cerebellar activity as well. So to keep that in mind as you're utilizing this for maybe some of your more true vestibular patients. But they could be under the drop target instead of the flag. This is the flag example, but the drop target can be great. Having them be able to move without moving the laser can be a great place to start. Maybe adding some movement of the limbs on top of that can be another additive, or starting to move the laser off the center of the target is what I'm going to work through with this one. And of course, again, you can have them go through certain numbers on the target. You can give them math to go along with that for some cognitive overlay. It can be a nice additive for engagement and motivation for your patient while they're doing this activity. Or have them start crawling. This is a great pediatric activity if you're working with any pediatrics. Having them crawl while keeping the laser on a line, even if it's a line that you made with tape on the ground or on the carpet in your clinic, and making that engaged, or having them move the laser side to side as they go through that particular activity, really driving some midline cerebellar for posture activities. You can implement this type of treatment and address that in a horizontal position rather than always just the vertical position. And of course, you can see me working on those number targets here and the motivation of being able to move and call those out with different patterns. Okay, as an application there. So let me remove some of these things, and we'll go back to some other activities. Let me get rid of some of this. All right, what do we have down here? So while we're on this topic, let's move over to joint position sense testing. So as I mentioned before, this has been completed in one of our previous live streams, but let's just review this real quick for those who weren't able to jump on that one. So inside of our clinician kit, we have this maze clock target that's included, and we standardize joint position sense air testing inside of this. We put it 5 feet away from the target. Anything that's outside the target of this light blue circle here, this bullseye, is going to be outside the standard deviation, just by adapting it with simple math. Anything inside the blue field is going to be inside the standard deviation. So remember, we do between 1 and 3 pre-tests with eyes open. The literature is a little bit variable for that. But then we do up to 6 repetitions of eyes closed testing. Now, based on the current systematic review, I believe by DeVries, that was 2015, if you have 3 or more repetitions that are outside the standard deviation, and again, that would be this light blue field, then that's going to be considered positive for a joint position sense air testing. So if I do 3 tests and all 3 are outside the standard deviation, I can go ahead and move on from that. Now, if I do 4 tests and they're all inside the standard deviation, I can also stop testing, because that's not going to yield 3 positives for outside the standard deviation, and those would be considered negative testing. So if we look at this gentleman doing the standard testing, beauty of the ball and socket joint right here is that he can look at the center target, and then I'm moving the laser down into it. Don't have them move it down into it. They want to keep their original posture there. He's going to perform a repetition of eyes open. You can cue him to not turn his torso, of course, or put a laser on the torso. And then we can do eyes closed. Let's see if I can get this. And then he's going to come back to where he thinks the center of the target is, and let him kind of work on it for a second and then determine if they're in or out. So that was outside barely. He's going to do another one here. He's going to come down. He's going to overshoot again. So that's outside the standard deviation again. Let's do another one. Again, we could do up to 6. But what's going to happen here with his eyes closed? And he thought he made a correction, and he's way off again. So that's 3 out of a potential 6. He already has a positive for a joint position sense air to right rotation. We'd have to redo for left rotation. You can do extension and you can do flexion. If you're getting more dynamic with, which is what I do with my concussion patients, later on after they're feeling good, I'll come back and do their quadrant, which is not very research-based, but it kind of follows the same idea of, hey, can I have you look up and to the right and come back down to where you think it is? Can I have you look up and to the left, down and to the left, down and to the right, and make sure that everything is kind of normalized across there. So I'll adapt the standardized testing into more dynamic applications with that. All right, so that's joint position sense air testing. Let me close these out again to get them out of the way. And other applications. So we can start getting some applications for some dual tasking or some off-axis training. So in this application, we have this person in single leg stance, and he's going to go through the combination of times zero viewing, so motor control tracing in single leg stance, and he's doing an infinity pattern here. So why would I want him to do this? As I challenge the system more and I narrow his base of support, we might see more decompensated activities there. And it's giving me a below and above axis representation here. So as he goes to the other side with 45 degrees, so he's pointed off axis, off the target with his torso, he can either do the small motions or he can do the large motions, which I think he's going to go through here. Now, if you watch what happens when he's to the left, he really changes his control pattern. He freezes a little bit. He can't get back to the center. This one is nice and precise, and this one is still tough down there for him. If we compare that to the other side, which I think he'll go through next, got better there on that third one. As he starts to go through the other axis, down to the right and up to the left, much more comfortable for him to do that. Okay, so that gives us some indication by seeing that immediate visual feedback. We got some things that we got to work on in this position down here to retrain. So I'll probably take them through different size excursions. I'll have them go through different extremes of right rotation to really drive home that right cerebellar activity with the cervical spine, and have them go through those control patterns over in this lower quadrant, based on what we saw with just the simple visual feedback assessment there for us. Other actions that you could piggyback off of with this would be adding in some dual tasking. So we're going to change the laser in this case from being on his head to being in his arm. So he's going to go through more complex movement patterns, some more peripheral cerebellar activity by going through some arcing motions with his arm. I have him in narrow base of support, so this is further progression, and then he's going to dual task by doing a toss and catch with the left hand. This is definitely going to be very tough, but this is progression over a few weeks for him. So if we play the video out here, you can see the complex movement pattern with the right hand. Want that elbow extended if possible, and then he's going to have to do a prediction task with dual tasking with the toss and catch, and he's on one leg. There's me videotaping. Okay, so we can watch that one more time. Single leg stance, complex movement patterns, maybe some peripheral vision, some dorsal stream vision going on there, dual tasking with a toss and catch there. So this person is post CVA, mild effect. All right. So let's thanks, Dr. Davidson. So great info on applications. Wanted to come back to the, let's stop sharing here for a second. Wanted to come back to the chat before we move on to a few more dynamic walking applications with the motion guidance device, and then also get into that Parkinsonian or movement disorder population, just with some ideas. So if you have any questions for the chat, go ahead and throw those in there. Otherwise, we'll move on in just about 30 seconds. Don't forget to stay all the way through to the end today so I can give out the code for discounts at our store at motionguidance.com. And again, visit us on social media channels at @motionguidance for Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Love the interaction there, especially from our international audience, people using motion guidance all over the world with different applications, much more engagement with these live streams, getting the word out of how to do this. So a question here, do you ever incorporate vibration of the neck or torso? Well, that's a great question. Some haptic input there. Just clinically outside of motion guidance, yes, of course. especially for particular patients, depending on if we're trying to work on certain decompensations or stimulate certain systems to see if we can get others to kick on. We'll definitely incorporate vibration. I don't have a vibration machine in my clinic from a platform standpoint. I think those are pretty cool. I've yet to get that purchase in there, but we will either manually or really dial down an input with like a Theragun and put that on different parts of the body. That's a great question. That can be super effective depending on your patient population that you want to work with that with. I have been fooling around with that more also with the movement dysfunction population. So things like dystonia, things like Parkinsonianism, orthostatic tremor, things like those. Yeah, you're welcome. Great. All right. Last call for questions. Of course, we'll have another chat breakout session in just a moment. All right. Good. All right. So let's share the screen again and go through these last applications with walking and ambulation. All right. All right. So let's get rid of that. We just did that one. And so let's talk about these two. So this is a common one. This is called infinity walking or butterfly walking. So this is a pretty common setup in clinic, but I want to show you the dynamics of adding in visual feedback immediately for what you might be able to see for decompensations and where you might need to train. These are common applications that we see on social media or in some educational series of just being able to do this. And people mark these as, well, you're getting different parts of the vestibular system, the visual system, body awareness, mechanoreceptor integration, and of course, being able to turn with the head, neck, as well as the inner ear. And yes, those all check that box. But there are differences that we can understand with putting the visual feedback on that allow us to tie into where they're having their biggest changes. So oftentimes this is done in a clinic where you have just targets on the ground, or sometimes you put up chairs. I prefer chairs or a larger target. These are foam rollers that I use in my clinic because it allows them to also integrate the peripheral vision or the dorsal stream vision for at least recognizing in space where they are compared to other objects. So for patients who are having a struggle with depth perception, or maybe they're having some thalamus integration, a blind spot that's not really quite adapted yet to get back to normal function, this can be super beneficial. So if we roll out this video and we just kind of watch it, they have a drop target on the clock. I use a motion guidance contact pad to stick behind it. And they are just walking around while keeping their visual field high. So you can see if they start to visually cheat pretty easily because the laser will drop down. You've seen that already once, and we'll watch this video again. But they just keep that centered up. They're going to be able to see with their peripheral vision where they are around those targets. And there's a consequence for these particular targets. So if you rub into the foam rollers, we'll talk about that there in a second. They could knock those over pretty easily. It's going to give them a sense of motivation to not do that. But if you notice, he has a certain side and a certain rotation, either visually or from the neck, that he doesn't like to move toward as comfortably. So let's go back over this video and take a look here. Okay, so we could break this down in real time. So he's moving to the left there, which is right rotation as he comes back over. It's going to be left cervical rotation as he moves through. And he also has a narrowed excursion on the left compared to the foam roller. And he gets over and he's a little wider on this one. You can see him shuffling there to come back. So he doesn't look as comfortable over on that right side. And so once we stop him, we go, okay, go ahead and go the opposite way for me. All right. As he starts to back up, he doesn't like that change in direction. He kind of came off the target there a little bit, really drops down there. You can see that full excursion. He wants to put his hand out because he doesn't know where that is compared to when he's moving around the other side. So this can really add a lot of value especially videotaping these and then going back over those later as a clinician, or going over them with the patient in real time about why are we working on what we're working on. You can see these in real time as a clinician. You can see them in real time as a patient, but also having a video log, if they'll allow you to do that, to show your progress over time. You might be able to save these still clips or videos into their patient file, depending on what sort of software you use. They can add extras even on the documentation side for what you're working on. So that was a little bit of a struggle over on this side, and he knew it. Just telling a little bit about his case as he went through further attempts at either going faster or really not looking at all and dropping that head down. He knocked the foam roller over several times on this right side. So we can take breaks and then go do that again for him. But we also have this video, which is progressing a little bit, because he is going to then lose his visual field and have to turn his body to acquire it again. So he's actually going to turn toward the outside. This is a great application for athletes. So as they're resolving from concussion, being able to lose their visual field and come back and acquire that visual field quickly can be super important for things like soccer, football, where you literally have to have your head on a swivel and get that prediction, but you have to might be moving very quickly, especially on like set plays in soccer from a corner kick, and people are moving around. They're leaving the goalie area and they're coming back. For headers, there's a lot of moving pieces. These can help prime them for being able to go to back to that environment. So if we play this, you'll see here, as he moves through again in the infinity pattern, he keeps the laser on the target as long as he can, and then he'll take his head away. So it goes through a large cervical excursion and a body rotation there to come back. So this is the task. And you'll notice a few things on this task as we kind of run this through, and then we'll back it up again. All right. So going through. So as he's going to the left side, he likes to come back, and he's precise coming back onto the target on this side. As he goes through, he has to take a wider excursion here, and he can't get the laser back up there very quickly. Here, he's right on the target as he comes back to it. As he comes back around this way, and it takes a while for him to center that back up as he's moving. So again, we have a dominant side or a hypotonic side of a symptom presentation that he has to work on. So he can see this, but he's going to need extra education about what we're doing. Okay, you line that one up very quickly. Get your head faster around. There you go. Get that laser on the target as you come back through. So if we look through that again, we can start maybe here. So look at the lag, and when that laser actually gets back on there, he's already past the foam roller on this side, and he's at the foam before the foam roller on this side. So we have a little excursion measurement that we can go through there, a distance measurement. And again, he just can't get that right rotation coming back around. His visual field is not fixating quite as well on that target as he comes back around that side. So for him, this is probably not going to be that big of a deal functionally. For other higher level function people, like maybe some of your athletes, or people that have to move in tight spaces very quickly, this will be tough. The faster they have to move, of course, the chance of them having a dizziness score might go up. So on that VOMS of between 0 and 10, they might be they higher on that type of score for dizziness. But they can train this. Once they see it and they see where their deficit is, they can give themselves feedback about how well they're doing. Which is great, because then motion guidance ends up being just as much of a coach as it is a tool for us. All right. And then let's take a look finally at this application. Now, this was posted with permission for this presentation today, or given permission for it. This is a video sent in to us from a person who works a lot with Parkinsonian patients. And he just wanted to show us the different things that he's working on. I have a current patient right now who has orthostatic tremor. So she just, in resting, she starts to get tremor, but she doesn't have the same presentation or the same diagnostics as Parkinsonianism. So if we look at this particular video, this person has Parkinson's as a diagnosis. He's going back and forth between two targets for some motor control applications. There's a huge postural component of as soon as they turned on the laser and they wanted to keep, during his walking, keep the laser on the target. Let me go back just a second. His posture, his upright posture changes. And as everybody's probably understanding on this call, that forward posture, that center of gravity change can be super important as far as predictability for falls. Mix that with a bradykinetic and a freezing posture, and that's where Parkinsonian patients really get into trouble. So he is using this for training of upright posture, gaze fixation out into the community rather than typical gaze fixation, which is down here at the floor, and working on that through different functional patterns. Then he's getting them to do different things. So if we play this video further, he's using our motion guidance maze with the JPE flag on it and the clock overlay to get them to do cognitive challenges. So go to a certain number based on some math. We showed this earlier in the live stream, and coming back to the middle. He's also going to show a person working through the maze with this particular setup here. So you'll see the target move back and forth on the clock, and then moving around the maze. So what I am seeing personally with my, if I pause this for a second and just give a little bit of extra input, with my orthostatic tremor, she didn't want her video up here, so I respected that. But with the orthostatic tremor that I'm seeing, my patient that has just a basal ganglia issue, but it's much less common than Parkinsonianism, but it's not Parkinson's disease, is moving through the maze. She will still freeze a little bit, and she'll start to shake with her tremor. The more that she notices that she freezes, the more tremor she gets. So she's been working on this and working through the maze, reducing that freezing and bradykinetic response, and she's improving her time through the maze. So we'll time her start down here to finish, or she'll go in reverse and go from the finish back down to the start. And she's noticing improvements that carry over into real time of she's starting to change her thought process when she gets the tremor, to stop focusing on the tremor, but focusing on the breakthroughs. So this will hopefully be encouraging in this population, maybe with some research in the future for anybody who's interested in this population. Maybe look for that coming up. But again, an external focus of attention. So instead of just trying to initiate, hey, can you put your foot in the box? The laser is going to go into the box. And then he's doing more of a dynamic movement with a jump to step on the laser as he goes through. I thought this was a great application for working on getting through that bradykinetic posture. And then muscle coordination obviously carries over to some functional activity. So he has them work on timing with boxing, which I think is great for motor applications and for cerebellar function. Same thing here, just being able to get the timing right, get them up there and being able to function through. And then more upright posture things. I think he even has them playing ping pong toward the end of this, which has other great things. So look at that Parkinson's project. Look them up. They're a great organization, and I appreciate them sharing that video with us for this particular live stream. So let's get back out of that. Let's go into back into the chat forum. I'm going to stop sharing here. All right, great. Okay, so any more questions? Got one coming in. I've used the figure 8 walking, just looking at a target with the head turns, but when you use the motion guidance, it's a great assessment tool to see where deficits are. I hope that really helps you. That's a great comment, and I think that's exactly tying into what we see a lot of people doing applications in vestibular rehabilitation. And they're good applications, and they definitely can work. Otherwise, we wouldn't use them. But having people understand exactly where their deficits are in these applications can be a real world changer for some of our patients, whether that's using an oculomotor, the infinity type walking. So I hope this helps in getting people to use that visual feedback more commonly for the application process that we're using for exercises for those patients. So I really appreciate your comment. Any others? before we get this live stream taken care of for today. Give a few minutes there. Oh, great. And you were from Ireland. Awesome. Thanks for coming in for this live stream. That's great to have you. Appreciate that. All right, so let's get on to code. So the code for today for completing through the live stream, if you go on to motionguidance.com and you type in Black Friday 30, we're actually giving a little bit of an extra discount for the live stream for the Black Friday discounts coming up in Austin, Texas. Okay, good. That's great. So Black Friday 30 will get you 30% off all of our products, and except for the bundled distributor pack. So everything else you get 30% off of the store if you go on to motionguidance.com. And please don't forget to go onto our YouTube page and our Vimeo page. Look at these applications. We have a lot of things that could, tie into our home packs, which the Parkinsonian group is starting to give a lot of those out, so people have that regular input. Remember, as distributors, you're getting those at a lower cost to either pass that savings on to your patients or to drive revenue through your clinics. So make sure you check those out. And if you have more questions after this is done, please email us at info@motionguidance.com. That's going to come to myself as well as Dr. Tal Blair, and we'll both be able to answer those questions for everybody out there in motion guidance land. All right. All right, well, thanks for joining us today, and look forward to our next application. That's in a few weeks. Our next live stream goes over golf applications and sports-specific applications, so we hope to see you there for that. Everybody have a good holiday season, and we'll talk soon. Have a good day.